well, welcome. Tonight we have Rich Turner speaking on his own exhibition here, which is tonight's opening night, How I Saw It. Rich started out his photography career in the Navy, and actually was on the Antarctica expedition, one of the bigger things, for the next 20 years almost. He's been working in photojournalistic work, and 16 of those being in our own Stockton record. In 1990, he started his own side gig, doing fine art photography and freelance work. In 2018, he started the Soundings online digital magazine, which is very cool. It's good to check it out if you haven't. Some great photography, good stories, particularly on the issues and history and stuff of the Delta region. So let's welcome Rich Turner.
Well, thanks. This is a great crowd. Thanks for coming out. There's probably a lot of other things you could be doing, and yet you're here. So thanks for coming. I want to thank this museum. I remember a phone call I got from Todd, who is now retired. And he said, just out of the blue, "Hey, Rich, how would you like to create an exhibit for the museum?" I thought it was an impressionist doing Todd Roostaller. I couldn't believe that he would call and offer that. But that was a long time ago, about 3 years ago, I guess. It took me a year to build it. And then we got it up, and COVID hit. When I was unloading the truck, Susan Obert, who's now the CEO, was helping me unload the truck, of all things. And she said, "Oh, Rich, I should tell you, we have to close down because of COVID. But don't worry, we're going to hang it anyway, because it'll blow over in a few weeks, and your exhibit will be up." So it hung for 8 months, and nobody saw it, except for the last week or so. So we're doing it again as an encore. So anyway, let's see, where was I going to start here? I want to thank this museum for that wonderful invitation, and everybody here has just been wonderful to work with. Andrea Dompe is I don't think she's here tonight, but she hung the show not only once, but twice. So, well, we were joking about that the other day. So anyway, since this is kind of a retrospective show, and we talk about the Navy a little bit, I should probably tell you a little bit about that. How did I become a professional photographer? Back when I could hardly spell it. And so I joined the Navy out of high school, about a year out of high school. I thought I was going to be a mechanic, because I was a car guy in high school. I had 3 years of auto shop. And so the recruiter says, "Yeah, be a mechanic. We need mechanics all the time." Okay, so I thought my career was all set. Join the Navy, do 4 years of mechanic work, and then I could come out and get a job anywhere. So I go through boot camp, 16 weeks or so. Toward the end, there's that sort of, what do you call it, an exit interview of sorts. And personnel officer, lieutenant, I'm a recruit, and here's a lieutenant. I'm scared to death. I'm a deer in the headlights. "Sit down, Turner." It's a one-on-one interview. And he says, "What do you want to do while you're in the Navy?" "I'm going to be a mechanic." That's what the recruiter said. And this personnel officer is actually looking at my papers, looking at my aptitude test scores. And he says, "Yeah, you got really high marks in mechanical arts, but you have higher scores in something else. What do you think that is?" "I don't know." And he said, "Graphics." Graphics? What's graphics? I'm 19 years old. I'm not sure I ever heard that term, that word, used by itself, photographics or something like that. And I said, "Oh yeah, I had 3 years of photography in high school too. Does the Navy actually have photographers?" Yeah, they do, and we need them. And you already know more than the people coming out of the A school, so we're just going to send you straight to a photo lab. But actually, before he said that, I'm programmed in my head to be a mechanic because I love cars, I love working on things, back when you could actually find the engine under the hood, you know. And so, okay, I've got my career set for me. But he says, you could be a mechanic or you can be a photographer. Which is it? What do you want? I said, man, that's a big decision. I mean, can I think about it? And he says, yeah, time's up. I've got 50 more men out there to talk to today, so what's it gonna be? So just like that, a snap decision, I'm gonna be a photographer. Well, right out of boot camp, they sent me to a place I'd never heard of. NAS Lemoore, south of Fresno. I'd never heard of the place, and on top of that, there's a Navy base in the middle of the California Valley. I'm 19 years old, haven't been around much, and that's me. And what's going on here is I reported to this photo lab. They didn't expect me, and so I'm sort of extra. But the chief wanted me to look around the base, and he assigned somebody to show me, where I'd be doing my work for the next 2 years. And as I'm walking out the door, he hands me this satchel full of 4x5 camera and film holders. And he says, just take some pictures of things that interest you as you walk around looking at the base. So this friend, he became a friend. I didn't know him at the time, and I didn't know he shot this picture of me, but he shot this, and a couple of days later gave me a print, and I had to give some prints to the chief, and he just looked at them and kind of passed them. Okay, thanks, good. No praise or anything like that. But anyway, I worked there for 2 years doing everything there is to do in photography. Whoops, wrong direction. That's right, you taught me that. It's the bottom button. And after about a year, the chief comes to me and says, hey, you want to fly in jets? Yeah, okay. So I had to go through some training, ejection seat and stuff like that. And so I'm working in the darkroom one day after all this training I went through. Chief comes in, hey Turner, suit up. You got a flight going in a few minutes. They're holding it up for you. I mean, no notice. And I didn't have my own gear, so he loaned me his, and you can tell it's a little bit small for me. Not that I'm that big a person, but and so I went flying in a plane just exactly like this in the back seat. And not this airplane, and this isn't my photograph, I just happen to have a picture of one of these things, just so you would see the kind of pictures that I shot for the Navy. And that's a Shrike missile that's going to fly and blow up a dummy tank at China Lake weapons system.
Is that your picture?
This is my picture, thank you. Brains of the outfit, Joanna, thank you. Anyway, so it took a few flights before I was able to get pictures this good, because they're pretty violent rides, as you might imagine. And after they fire these, we do all the Blue Angel thing, trying to shoot down each other and stuff. They were e-ticket rides, if anybody's old enough to remember what an e-ticket is. So anyway, let's keep going. After 2 years at Lemoore, I volunteered for Operation Deep Freeze. And at the behest of one of my mentors who had been through that a couple of times, actually wintered over. I didn't, but he did. And he said, Rich, you got to come with me. I'm running the photo mapping on the C-130, and I need somebody I can trust. So he'd hawk me into volunteering for Deep Freeze, and that was my home away from home for 2 years. C-130. And what we're doing here is we're at Halley Bay Station, which is way across from McMurdo is on the New Zealand side if you fly directly south, and all the way across the continent, across the South Pole and over to Halley Bay, and we were there for about 3 days doing photo mapping. And that's the back end. And what we're doing here is refueling. All this fuel was cached there the year before this mission was planned a whole year in advance. And these little antennas that hang down are early versions of sonar that you can measure the depth of ice. And we had a British research team on the airplane and operating that. But my job was operating a 3-camera mapping system. So I don't want to run out of time here. Got out of the Navy, went to work at my hometown newspaper, the Roseville Press Tribune, the little town where I played my Little League ball and sang in the church choir and all that kind of stuff. Joined the Navy, saw the world, came back, and I applied for every newspaper in California And no, yeah, nice Navy pictures, but we need photojournalists, and come back when you have some experience. So, as a Hail Mary last resort, I walked into my little hometown 5-day-a-week newspaper. My brother was a paper boy and hired me practically on the spot as their first full-time photographer. So they gave me a chance when her name was Carmela Martin. She was a veteran of the Sacramento Bee and retired, and then bought this little newspaper to run in her later years. So bless her heart. This is the Roseville munitions train explosions, 1973, I think. Blew the little town of Antelope off the map. Miraculously, there were only minor injuries. No one was seriously injured. And these kinds of explosions were going off for hours. And it woke me up on a Saturday morning, and that turned into a pretty interesting news event. Thinking back on my first few days or first week or so at the newspaper, Carmela Martin was her name, and I'm young, I'm deer in the headlights again, and I was out on assignments for real busy morning, and I came in, I was kind of hustling, and she's typing on her little Selectric on her typewriter, and she looked over her glasses, and she says, "Where have you been, Turner? It only takes a 60th of a second to take a picture." And I thought she was serious, and I stopped and I looked at her, and she just kind of winked at me. And so I go back to my darkroom, and I'm thinking, you know what, I'm going to like this business, and I'm going to like working for her. and it worked out pretty good. Let's go backwards. So I'm now at the Stockton Record, and I get an assignment to go to UOP. There is a Libyan folk dance troupe that is performing, and I walked into Raymond Great Hall over there, and there's just no light, there's no stage, there's no way I'm going to get a meaningful picture of this performance. So I tried, and I wasn't getting excited about anything, but as I'm walking out the door, I kind of looked over, and this one guy, kind of our eyes met, and we didn't speak a common language other than just looking at each other, and I just pointed at my camera, and he said, "Yeah, sure." So I got a couple of frames, and I just remember this wonderful encounter. As brief as it was just this great encounter of a total stranger who traveled halfway across the world to entertain us. This is again Stockton Record. The assignment was to just go get a picture of a cab driver, because the story was there had been a rash of robberies at night. I mean, think how vulnerable a cab driver is, right? And I didn't really know what the story was. They just give you an assignment, get a picture of a guy over a yellow cab. So I went to the reporter, and I figured out what the story was about. And I thought, maybe I can do something better than just stand a guy next to his car. So I kind of figured out this, and I called the cab company, and they let me set up a camera on well, it was a tripod, but I took the third leg off of it, and I just kind of bolted it with hose clamps to the grill of the car. And I ran a cable into the front seat that was attached to my Nikon. It was a little electrical cable. And so I could operate the shutter, and I had a handheld flash that wasn't attached to anything. So I've got a 3-second or a 5-second exposure going, and once I push the button, then I pop the flash manually and light the driver. And so this told the story of vulnerability and, in the middle of the night. At least I hope it did. But Duell Vocational Institution, it's now decommissioned. It's a vacant spot now, but it was known as a gladiator school to inmates and the guards because of all the fighting and sometimes fatalities that occurred there. And they were in lockdown because there was some rioting going on, and we got to go to do the story. everything was locked down except the honor wing. So these are two guys who were in the honor wing on the inside looking out. I call it doing time. And there's a little layout of other pictures, additional pictures upstairs. But it was real interesting to go into a place like that because you have to sign a waiver. And the waiver says, there's no such thing as a hostage. We're not going to negotiate for your safety if you're taken hostage. Okay. So I got to go in there with that thought in my head. Everything turned out okay, though. And there's one of the residents. And they all allowed us to take their pictures. We didn't take any pictures of people who didn't want them taken. Pretty cramped. Okay. Yaqui Lopez. Most of you probably heard of Yaqui Lopez. Sitting at the ringside. There's an upside and a downside. The upside of being here is the vantage point. The downside is you have to wipe your lenses a lot and glasses. Lewis Park softball. Very busy place in baseball season. I was even on the Stockton record team myself, so they're very serious about their softball out there. And I don't know how these pictures look to you guys back there, but Tri-X film is a very grainy film, and when you blow it up, it looks grainy. I kind of like that, but you know. Crop duster, obviously. Remember Humphrey? My caption for this is, you're going to need a bigger boat. He finally got turned around and they got him back out to the ocean. A few years later, he came back in the bay and got stranded on a mud flat, and the Coast Guard had to tow him back out. He had a bad sense of direction. Movie set, Bound for Glory. They had a set out in Isleton that it took me back in time, way before my time, but I got to tell you, it was so authentic. So this is from the movie set, and was it David Carradine who played Woody Guthrie in that movie? This picture, as fun as it was, I was very surprised. And we used to send pictures whenever we wanted to the Associated Press. If we got a picture we kind of liked, we could send it out on the wire, and then the Associated Press would send it out if they thought it was good. I got clips from German newspaper and from I think it was Denmark newspaper. So who knows wherever it ran all over the world, but just a fun picture. A kid and his dog playing on the tennis courts out at Lewis Park. Rick Nelson, obviously, he was playing at the county fair, and I was on assignment, and I see he's looking you right in the eye. Isn't that fun? That was only about 6 months before his plane crash. Anybody know who that is? Jamie Lee Curtis, yeah. So she was a student at UOP. She was a sophomore, and Hollywood was calling. And I got the call in a radio car, go over to UOP and meet Jamie Lee Curtis, get some pictures of Jamie Lee Curtis. Who's that? Well, she's the daughter of Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh. Oh, okay. So I knock on the door, and the house mother comes down and lets me in. She'll be here in just a moment. So she came down, sat down on the couch. We just started talking. I didn't pose her. We were just chatting. I just asked if I could take her picture while we sat there talking. So that was another very pleasant encounter. You know, the newspaper was strictly black and white. We weren't doing color at all in the days that I worked there. But every now and then I got a hankering to shoot color on certain jobs. And so when I felt like the black and white needs were satisfied, I'd pull out my other camera that was loaded with color film. This is a big warehouse fire down on Scotts Avenue, south of downtown. And this was high noon, and it looks like a night fire, but there was so much smoke in the air that it got dark, and it looked like this. Now this looks like a major conflagration. It was really a grass fire out on Smith Canal. And these firefighters are so good, you gotta be quick because they're gonna have it knocked down really fast. But just as I happened to be focusing on this guy, it flared up and he got it put down pretty quickly. But yeah, good Stockton firefighters. I think there's still a Class A fire department. This is a pipe manufacturer down in Tracy, Amaron Pipe or something like that. And this was about 15 years ago, and they were building pipes for a desalination plant that was being built in San Diego. This is a gas well flare test out Highway 12 near the Macombie River. And some people thought it was a horrible thing to be happening. I don't know much about it, but I went out and got some pictures of it, and it turns out that they were just testing it. They capped it off after a while, and I don't know the results of it, but I kind of like the picture anyway. Some of you might know Ort Loftus. I photographed him for a book we were doing in conjunction with the Stockton Chamber of Commerce. And I called Ort, and I told him I wanted to photograph him by his sign. And he says, hey, I'm free, let's go do it. And I said, Ort, it's high noon. I don't want to take your picture at high noon out there. And he says, oh, okay. And so we talked about when to do it and everything. So we decided when to meet and where, because I'd already scouted the area and I wanted to be safe, of course. But I said, Ort, maybe I should call the police department and see if they would give us a little escort so that we'd all be safe. And he says, no, don't do that. They might say no. Let's just go ahead and do it and ask permission later. I liked Ort. Dino Cortopassi. Comstock's magazine called me and gave me the assignment. And I said to Winnie Comstock, well, what kind of pictures do you want? She just said, surprise me, click. Oh, great, no guidance. So we met in his office, and I was doing the obligatory executive with, you know, sitting at this desk, sitting on his desk, doing whatever, you know, all these other contrived things. And I saw his pond out there, and I said, hey, do you ever fish in this pond? Oh, yeah, sometimes I go out and cast flies just for relaxation. Let's do that. He says, I don't have time. I just got back from vacation. I don't have time. And he was just really sort of, what's the word, taciturn. He was just all business. He just had other things on his mind. I was kind of a rock in his shoe. And I was trying to get some animation out of him. And I said, well, I hear that you collect motorcycles. Boy, he brightened up. He said, oh, yeah. So he gets on the phone and he says to one of his guys, could you bring the Indian around and just put it wherever Rich wants and tell me when he's ready. So we had it all set up. I had a reflector set up and stuff like that. And he comes out wearing that red jacket. And I thought, yeah, that's a photographer's dream. You know, that's Dino. So let's see, what else have we got here? Oh, yeah. Dan Court. Always trying to get something a little unusual if it's possible. And again, it was Winnie Comstock, and again, this sort of, well, surprise me, I don't know, just send us some pictures of Dan Court. So again, I did, you know, trying to break the ice and doing some pictures of him up in his penthouse office up there. And, but before I went up there, I parked across the street from the building. And I'm just staring at this building, you know, how am I going to get this in a picture that makes any sense? And I saw that ledge, and I just, oh man, he'll never go for it. He'll never go for it. Well, because I wouldn't. But, so I told him what I was thinking, and he says, well, let's go see. So we went downstairs. He opens up a window. He said, yeah, I can do that. So I went down, set up on a tripod, and you know, and I'm yelling up at him, you know, do this, do that, do this, and I'm about finished. He says, "You finished yet?" So there's the shot. So anyway, nice guy. Left us too soon. In 1978, I had the assignment to go out with a writer and spend pretty much a whole day with asparagus harvesters. It had just rained. It's a real sticky mud. I don't know if you guys know what peat dirt's like. Every time you take a step, you get taller because it sticks to the bottom of your feet, and so you grow as you walk along. Well, it was a pretty arduous day, and I got the idea, well, asparagus, I call it asparagus loss because it used to be a king crop in San Joaquin County. And I personally just knew I didn't like asparagus because growing up, my mother would buy canned asparagus. So as a kid, I just didn't like it. But when I moved to Stockton, people in Stockton started talking about the coming asparagus season. As if it was the new baseball season. There was really a lot of excitement. Boy, asparagus is coming. But I didn't understand it until I went out and watched these guys work, and then I tried some fresh asparagus, steamed, and a little bit of butter and salt. Whoa, man, it's really good. But anyway, in 2016, I got the idea, well, what's changed? There's a lot of time in between 1978 and 2016. Is it automated? No, that's nothing much has changed. Technology's changed. I can shoot color now with digital camera, but not much has really changed. But the thing that did change is the economy. And I talked to a grower out in Victoria Island and asked her when they stopped, or why did they stop growing asparagus? Well, obviously, they couldn't compete with south of the border producers. She told me that they pay their workers, at the time, in 2016, she told me that they were paying their workers $10 an hour plus benefits. The Mexican workers may make $10 a day. And there's just no way that American growers can compete with that. I think there's still 2 farms out there. Maybe, Kevin, you might know. Who's growing asparagus now? No? Yeah. Not many. I think Klein Farms might have a contract with the new Asparagus Festival. And I think maybe Eddie Zuckerman is growing some, but not major acreage like it used to be. And let's see. Now, the technology did change in the packing shed, state of the art. You can see the difference between the two. But the economy sort of killed local asparagus, almost killed it. It's almost gone. Kind of a pretty picture, but it's a byproduct of forest fires. This was shot way back in the film days. It was a Kodachrome slide. And so these wildfires are nothing new, but I just happened to be out down the river, and I got this with the sun going down and a smoky sky. This is the finish sprint of the Delta Ditch Run. It starts in San Francisco at the San Francisco Yacht Club. It takes all day to race upriver, and so they all have the spinnakers out, and they're racing toward the Yacht Club in Stockton at the end of March Lane, Stockton Yacht Club. It was photobombed by the bird. I kind of like that. And this is dead of winter, almost calm, but just enough wind to fill the spinnaker. Just right downstream from Stockton. This was on the 4th of July. Port of Stockton, I was doing a lot of work with them because the port was being, the Rough and Ready Island, the Navy was abandoning or moving away from the Rough and Ready Island. This communication station was leaving. And there was a lot of red tape and a lot of photography was needed, which was good. But anyway, so I was on their call list. Pat Huff was the assistant director then. She called me on the 4th of July about noon. And she begged me. She said, "Rich, we've got this ship leaving. this afternoon. I know it's the 4th of July. Is there any chance you could get a helicopter and follow the ship out because we want to use it for our annual report? And I thought, well, I don't know. I mean, so I called my helicopter pilot. His name was Doug Jones. And man, he loved that call. He said, yes, I'd rather do that than do what I'm doing. Now, this is on the 4th of July. I didn't ask him what he was doing, but we met out at the airport. And so we started following this ship out. And so here's another shot of it. So we followed it. I don't know if any of you know where Mandeville is, and you probably heard of the 4th of July fireworks out at Mandeville. And so boaters come from all over the place, and pretty soon you can hardly see the water because there's so many boats anchored out there waiting for the 4th of July. But anyway, so we're just about beyond Mandeville, and we're turning around. We're about 20 minutes left of fuel, so we better hustle back. And so I'm looking over at Mandeville Tip where all these boats are, and I just asked Doug to kind of detour over, and I saw a group of boats that I kind of liked, because as photographers, we're always looking for beautiful shapes, right? So I spotted some beautiful boats. And that became the cover of the 1994 Port of Stockton annual report. So it was worth working on the 4th of July. Now, I called the port to find out so I could tell you guys, this is how much work I do for you. I called a guy I know there in the traffic department, and I said, hey, how many ships called on the Port of Stockton last year? He said, I'll have to call you back. I got to look it up. So he calls back and he said, Rich, I'm really sorry, but I missed 300 by 4. Really? 200? I'm really good at math. 296 ships came into Stockton last year? Yeah. That's a lot of ships, I think. But he was kind of upset because he didn't break the 300 number. But so anyway, we get lots of opportunities now to see these giants coming and going. This is the Antioch Bridge. And this is just downstream from the port. Just go down, you know, it used to be you could drive down that road, but now it's gated just for residents only, which I think is a good idea because now it's an even better place to walk, but safer even. So you see a lot of ships out there. There's lots of opportunities. And see how our time's doing here. And this is an older picture. This was film. And the serendipity thing, this wasn't an assignment. I was just flying anyway on something else, and this just happened to be going on. Now this channel, the Deepwater Channel, is 36 feet deep at low tide. It may even be 37 now, as somebody told me, but so that's how much power these little tugs have. That deep of water, and it makes it look like cream in your coffee. And this is, you know, where that's at. But the assignment was not to do this. The assignment was for Herrick Steel to take pictures of the skyline of San Francisco. And when I got over there, I saw this ship, and so, well, we got a detour to do this. And this. Now, what they were doing, there is a little laser pointer here, but I forgot how to work it. Maybe the bottom thing? No? Anyway. But anyway, these newer buildings, most of those buildings have Herrick Steel in them, and they wanted pictures of those to put in their brochures and stuff like that. And they liked those pictures enough that they sent me down to LA to do the same thing. So that was one that I offered up to them. It's fun to fly with good pilots, and it's my friend Doug Jones again. He flying in a helicopter with him. Now, he was a warrant officer in the National Guard. He flew the what do they call, Chinook helicopters with the two blades on them. And he said he loved my photo hops because he got to actually fly. He said it's like the difference between, you know, driving a Greyhound bus and a souped-up motorcycle. He liked the souped-up motorcycles because when I was flying with him, I was giving him directions like, can we go 6 feet higher? Can we go 4 feet to the left? And he would do it, but he would see me turn in my seat, and the helicopter would just instinctively turn, kind of like a cow pony for a, you know, a well-trained cow pony. Oh yeah, this picture reminds me of getting my digital feet wet. This is a film photograph. And digital market was knocking loudly on my door. Now I've got, what, 30 years behind me of film work. I actually knew what I was doing with film. But the market changes and things like that. Am I going to have to go into another business because I don't know a pixel from a grapefruit? And I read and read and read, and I didn't understand anything about it. But okay, well, all right. The cameras were prohibitively expensive for quality cameras, and so I couldn't do that. But I thought, well, let's just get a good scanner, because part of my profit center was reprints, client reprints. They need extra 8x10s or something like that. I was always sending them out. So I thought, well, let's try this. I gotta learn this. And so I kept shooting film, you know, as long as I possibly could. But, so I got the scanner, I got a good printer, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I open up that little book that comes with electronic stuff, and it says Quick Start Guide. You ever seen those? So I plug it in, and I just did those steps. And I made a scan, stuck it in Photoshop, got it sized for printing, and the first print that came off my Epson printer, 8x10, I looked at it and I wept with joy. Because it was better. I didn't know anything about what I was doing, but it was better than my custom prints coming from an analog lab. I was sold. And so when I look at this, and I chose this to scan because of all the detail. You know, aerial pictures have all these, you know, you could see the windows and all this kind of stuff. And I'm looking at this 8x10, it's better than my San Francisco custom lab. So, okay, all right. So, now this is for Sunrise Helicopters, who I used to fly with a lot before I met Doug Jones in a different company. This guy moved up to Sacramento with his company, but they were at Stockton Airport. And I was flying with him a lot. And the owner called me and said, hey, I want to do a brochure. What would you like to do? Because he didn't have any ideas. And I said, well, you're Sunrise Helicopters. Why don't we get a picture of a helicopter at sunrise? I mean, and he liked the idea. So we took off in the dark. I didn't know where we were going. I wanted to get up high enough to see if I could get some interesting ground below it. This is Lake Comanche. And this would have been in mid-90s, late 90s, film. And this is Middle River, or maybe it's Middle River up top. I'd have to get a map. But I really like this picture for the geometry and everything, but it also talks about subsidence. You see how much lower the ground is than the water. The water's at sea level. And parts of the Delta farmland have subsided because of man's cultivation and oxidation of the peat dirt, and it sinks and sinks and sinks. And in some areas it's 20 feet or so below sea level. So, yes. Okay, 15 minutes, I better hurry. Okay, you're right. Okay, TNT Trucking, obviously, but why is Craig Breedlove's car there? Well, TNT Trucking was a sponsor of Craig Breedlove trying to break this land speed record again. Breedlove had done it like 20 years prior to this. And so Terry Tarditi, TNT Trucking, and I flew out to Salt Lake City, rented a car, drove back to Bonneville Salt Flats, and we got this picture to go in his calendar. Working for TNT was fun. We always found good locations to shoot his trucks. Two different pictures here. It doesn't really show up as that maybe as well as I thought it might. But earthquake retrofit of the East Bay Municipal Utility District's aqueducts that come down from Pardee Lake. And the engineering is so good that the water flows all the way to Oakland from Pardee, gravity. There's not one pump along the way. But anyway, these guys call themselves pipe rats. And I got the assignment to go down and hang out with them. And it's really kind of weird when you're in a 6-foot diameter pipe. You can almost touch both sides, you know. And you walk a long way along these pipes, and some of it goes under delta water, and you know that when you're in there. But they were real big on safety and all of that, so I have fond memories of working with the pipe rats. Sandhill cranes, yeah, they're back in town for the season. If you're not a bird watcher, but you go out in the Delta this time of year, you're going to become one. Guaranteed. You know, it's no brainer. There's birds everywhere in this time of year. On the right there is a feeding frenzy. I think it was about 2004, summer-ish, when a levee broke and flooded Lower Jones Tract. It took about 6 months to repair the levee, and this is a guy redigging an irrigation ditch. Now, wife Joanna, sitting right here, is an artist in her own right. She was the art reviewer for the Maui News for several years. But anyway, somehow or another, luck, destiny, whatever, we got together. But we will go out and she will see something that I don't see. And in this case, we were driving around. She said, could you get me a reference picture over here? The light was really nice and everything. And a lot of times I'm thinking, I don't need another picture of a bird. I've got a lot of pictures of birds. But so I got the picture that she wanted, and I kind of looked a little bit to the right, and I saw these guys. I wouldn't have this picture if it wasn't for my artist wife. But this picture, I sent it to the Sandhill Crane Festival, and the strength of this picture, they made me the Artist of the Year a few years ago. Put it on T-shirts and with my name on it and everything, you know. So I'm a smart man. And I like playing with abstracts. Brilliant sunset. How many more sunset pictures do I need, right? I'm just going to have to file it or somehow or another deal with it, you know. And I looked down at my feet, and this was happening when there was a gorgeous sunset, and I thought, well, I like this too, so. Fall reflections in a mountain pond. And let's see, what do we have here? Ah, yes. I call this one grazing. Joanna was painting. We were up in the hills toward Oakdale, and I'm sitting on a lounge chair and having a beer, I think, and Joanna's painting a beautiful thing. And I didn't even get my camera out. I didn't think anything was going to be, you know, photogenic, but she's painting away, and all of a sudden the sky started turning this interesting color, and so I quickly put the camera together. And again, a picture probably wouldn't have happened if Joanna wasn't painting. Long exposure, and I'm standing on a dock that every time I move, now see the water's really calm, but if I just lean that way, then the floating dock moves. It's a long exposure because it's pretty dark, so I had to just stand real still to get that shot. I get this question a lot. You know, if I'm out shooting professionally or just, you know, plinking around, hey, Rich, what's the best camera? Well, I'll tell you. So the following pictures are going to be basically the camera I have in my pocket. This became a wraparound cover for a paperback version of Delta Grandeur, which is out of print now. But now, I don't know if you can see it from where you are, but over here, see these little dots here? That's a flight of ducks taking off. It was shot with an iPhone 6. You know, now what happened again? Joanna's painting, And we're out at Cosumnes River, just in the parking lot, no big deal. And I thought, I'm just going to go for a little walk out this boardwalk. And so I get out at the end and I see this. My real camera is in the car. And so I think, oh man, I'm going to kill myself. I could run back to the car and run back. I mean, I'm not going to. So I just kind of bit the bullet, pulled the camera out. It was an iPhone 6. So I started messing with this panoramic. Cameras do that? And so I'm trying to shoot these panoramics and stuff like that. It wasn't until I was looking for a cover photo for that book that I put it in the computer and I looked at that. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to worry so much about carrying my pro gear with me. So I used to fret, so I got to have it with me all the time, but now I don't worry so much about it. This is iPhone 12 that I have now. Just doing a walk out at the end of 8 Mile Road, and this is right after a rainstorm. So use the camera that you have with you, because that's the best one. And this was very recent, another walkabout after dinner. And it's technically not a great picture. I mean, if I'd had the real camera ready, I could have done a lot better. I don't care. I'd rather have this picture than no picture, because I didn't have the other camera with me. So that's the moral of the story, is use the camera that you have. Backyard. I was out doing a little yard work and, oh, say hello to my little friend. So, and this is up at the Crocker Art Museum. Another one that Joanna kind of nudged and said, hey, take a look. Okay, that's the end of the show. Any questions?
Talk a little bit about your post-processing, how much time you spend.
Less and less, because it's boring, but sitting in front of a computer is, kind of cross-eyed work, but, upload the photos, go through the equivalent of the old days, a contact sheet, pick the image that you like, and, just play with it. You have sliders in Photoshop. Play, get it where you want it. And there's even some auto settings that I've learned how to.
You're doing some decent vignetting and stuff on a lot of it. Looks.
I don't like vignettes. I mean, once in a while maybe, but I try not to be too obvious with stuff like that. Why did you think some of those were obviously vignettes? No, I'm kidding. I try not to mess around too much. There is a book in the museum store. In fact, I think they're back there in the back of the room, so feel free. They're signed and they don't cost extra. Yes, Sandy?
I wanted to ask you a question about fear. Because when I look at some of the places you have been and the situations that you have found yourself, to be a photographer would require a certain amount of steadiness and ability to concentrate on the thing that needs to be concentrated on. And I think that must have been part of the brilliance of that aptitude testing that you had when you were 19. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's a good question. Going back to the Navy, one day I was the duty photographer. In other words, we all have our own jobs in this division. It's military stuff, right? But so it's 4-section duty, so every 4th day I was on duty and I had to sleep in the photo lab. It's a very busy air station. There were always smoke in the cockpit calls, and so we just never knew when so it's kind of like being on part of the fire department. So we'd have to run out and do that stuff. Anyway, during the day, there was a mid-air collision off the base. It was fatal. And Chief runs in and says, grab the gear, go. The helicopter's warming up. And now again, I'm not old enough to buy a legal drink. And I went out with a corpsman and a doctor, where the one plane came down in pieces. The other guy ejected safely. And to answer your question, try to get to this quickly, but the camera became my badge of courage, if you will. I mean, I knew what I had to do, and it was photograph everything. And so I went out and, you know, it was a fatal thing to deal with. And I went through all the motions, and it was on a Friday, I remember it well, and my parents lived in Sacramento, and I was going to go home for the weekend anyway, about a 4-hour drive from Lemoore. I don't remember the drive. I mean, I left work, I mean, I flew back to the base and turned in my film to the lab there in the photo lab. And I mean, I couldn't think of anything else, but when I was doing my job, it was okay. I mean, it was like I knew what to do. You know, I had my job. And I think about that, and then I go to work for newspapers, and things like that would happen every now and then. And that was the installation. I could do my job and not get personally, you know, involved. There was one time that I did, and my daughter, who is right here, was just a little thing. And there was a train versus pickup. And all 3 occupants, father and 2 children, school-aged children, were killed. And it was a foggy morning, and they were coming up these roads, and it was just a horrible thing. Well, that was hard to separate from. But you know, I think it's just a matter of doing your job. But in the military, I did a lot of work with a gunner's belt attached to me, sitting on the side of a helicopter, and so I knew I wasn't going to fall out. I mean, I was attached, right? So you know, that was. You think, oh man, that's going to be really crazy. And my dad explained to me, he was a pilot too, he wasn't afraid of heights if he was in an airplane, but if he was standing on the edge of Glacier Point and looking 3,000 feet down with a railing there, that's different, you know. So there's all kinds of different fear and stuff. But I'm not sure if I answered your question. But,
Well, thank you for that.
yeah.
Fear of wild animals, the fearful situations.
Oh, okay, that's good. Okay, fear. So I had a great assignment from East Bay Municipal Utility District to go up and shoot the headwaters of the McCulmey River, because that's what feeds Pardee and where the water for Oakland comes in. And they just gave me artistic license to, you know, go up and just photograph everything that's attached to that watershed. So it was right after a woman was mauled near Placerville. She was out hiking or jogging, and a mountain lion got her, right? Well, so this was really early in the morning. I mean, I took off in the dark, and you use good light. But I hiked up this tributary, and I found a great spot, and I was just waiting for the sun to come up to get to light this area that I wanted to photograph. And then I started thinking about that mountain lion, and I started feeling like bait. And I really actually sat there and worried about that. Nothing happened, obviously, but I think I experienced some fear because I really thought about that. Anything else? Bad news. Cleveland school shooting. Horrible, horrible thing. And I wasn't too far away when I got the radio call. And again, just duty sets in, do the job, try to tell the story as well as you can without being as graphic as you have to be. There's a picture upstairs of a cop carrying a bent tricycle. And that was a fatal ice cream truck backed over a toddler. It was totally unintentional or, as an accident, but the best way I could tell that was just the cop walking away with a bent tricycle rather than show the obvious, so there are ways to tell those stories.
How would you cover that today, Rich? Now, with times are different today, could you have done more graphical?
No. I think there's a certain point at which you know, if you're reading the news, you want to know, but then, you know, there are things you don't have to show to tell the story. And I don't mean to change the story, but yeah. There's a picture up there of a crop duster accident. The son is viewing the father in a fatal accident, and it's one of the first news pictures. It's fairly graphic. I don't know. So, am I right? Am I wrong to show that? I don't know. Yes?
The picture of the photograph of the miniature chair,
Oh, yes, upstairs. Yeah.
how did you end up doing that? Was it for a magazine?
I got the call from my client. It was an office furnishings company. And I've known him for a while. In fact, he was in the clothing business before, and then he got into this other business. And he called and he said, "Hey, Rich, I got this guy. I can't remember his name now. It's him. But he's the designer of this 440, I don't know what it's called. You'd have to read the caption. I wrote all those things and I've forgotten them. You know, you write it, forget about it. But anyway, he called me that morning. He said, "Hey, this guy's in town, David Rowland. He designed these chairs, and it was a really big hit, and he made a lot of money with the design of these chairs. Very famous in the furnishing business." And he says, he's in town, he's visiting his mother, can we come over and get a picture? Well, yeah, but who is he? You know, and I had a big studio then and all this. And so he shows up, and I didn't have any time. I mean, we got to go, we can meet some other people. And I quickly set up a background. I set up the real chair and lit it. And he's holding this miniature model of the chair. And he's kind of this weird looking guy anyway. I mean, happily weird, his hair, you know. And he's holding this. And I probably didn't have 20 minutes to get that picture. So, you know, it was the studio lighting, obviously, but I was trying to interpret rather than just take a picture of him with his chair, you know. So that's the end result up there. Thanks for asking.
No, I thought that was a small world, right? Because his dad happens to be...
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Todd helped me write that caption because Todd knew his mother. Yeah. Todd's retired CEO here. Anyone else? Okay. Well.